Action!
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm here today with Ian Pons Jewell, who simply, I believe, is the best commercials director in the world at the moment. And this is not just my opinion. He's also been polled by the producers, a producers poll, a commercials producers poll that have voted him the best director in the world 2 years running. So we're going to go through his work today. We're going to go through quite a few of his jobs. So we're going to leave the links in the description, and we're going to try and edit some of the live footage of the work we're talking about into the podcast as well. Enjoy. So welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for giving up your time and coming along to this.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, you're entirely welcome. I have to say I had quite a unique experience going through your work, because I found it quite emotional, actually, I have to say, because, firstly, like, it has to be said that your website has all your work chronologically, right? So you can see, I could see your whole career develop from when you left film school up through the promo period up into the commercial period. And I found that absolutely fascinating to see the sort of tropes of how you work and to see how you develop those tropes and the relationships you got on the way, and to see what that brought to your work. But the first thing I have to say is I'm just amazed at the quantity that you've managed to shoot, particularly in commercials, when you started doing high-end commercials. I mean, how prolific you become and how quickly you became prolific, the amount of work you did. One of my we'll get into the sort of going back and starting at the beginning of your career, but one of the questions I want to ask you straight off the bat is, how did you kind of manage your time during that period? Because were you shooting simultaneously, or?
Yes. What happened was I was in videos for quite a long time, maybe comparatively to other directors or some other directors. I don't know. It's so different, every director, like how quickly they go from a video into commercials. But I was it's like 7 years, like 2009 to 2016 was music video, and to the point where I was like, I really was like, fuck it, like doesn't look like I'll be getting an ad. I won't do that path. I thought I wouldn't end up down that path, basically, but I was looking at it when I first made music videos. I then was like, oh yeah, so people do music videos and then like ads, and
you stumbled across music videos sort of by chance after leaving film?
I wasn't like an MTV kid or something that would watch music videos or anything. I would watch a lot of films, and then that was really what I did. And then when after university, I didn't know, I was like, I've got to make something, because it's been like 6 months or out of uni and I hadn't shot anything, and I had this like flash of fear, like am I just another statistic that went to film school and didn't actually end up being able to do it? Or so I was like, right, I've got to make something. And I thought, if I do a music video, more people will see it. That was the reason I thought I'd make a video. So if I make a short film, I've got no audience, maybe some people will see it, but just sort of really starting at the bottom. So and through doing music videos, then I discovered the world of music videos by making some, and then the world of production companies. There's production companies and there's directors signed to production companies. I had no idea. None of this was mentioned.
Taught to you at film school, yeah.
And then I was like, and they do ads, and I was like, shit, that's what Fincher did. It's music videos. Then
he was one of your biggest influences, was he?
Yeah, I mean, it's like for all of us, right? It's like just.
Yeah, there's something you said.
There's various directors. There's a lot of directors I'm just in awe of. Fincher's one of them. Like the language he's developed with, and that path was really interesting. Glazer as well, and like bunch of, we can list goes on of directors who did music videos, commercials, films. So that was, and then when I got the first commercial, I got. I then got another board came in. I was like, oh, like I've just made one. Another one's come in, pitched, got that one. And then whilst I was doing that one, another board came in for me. And I was like, oh shit, like this is really a really rapid industry.
This is through Anorak, was it?
Yes, yeah. Anorak, yeah. German commercials through Anorak. And I was like, this is quite a rapid thing. And I was like, they come in and I pitch and then they shoot like 3 weeks later. So I then calculated in my head that if I kept this pace, having just made one and was on to my second one and was about to do the third, I was like, that's 3 already. And if you go on a production company website, some of these, the directors I was looking up to at the time, they might have like 6 commercials on the website, 7. They've done a ton more, but the profile is essentially in the present moment of you looking at a director is kind of it's made up of the historical portfolio, but it's also in the moment of seeing the works that they've done at the time. So I just thought, well, if I just go if I go pretty full on with this, I felt I could hit the top tier quite like within sort of 3 years, and then bow out to do my film, because film has always been the thing,
right?
But I was also really I was quite conscious of seeing other directors I'd known or heard of kind of do a few ads, leave, film didn't happen, then they kind of can't go back to ads, and then their profile diminishes, and it's so precarious. That the thing I really wanted to do is get financially secure and solidify my profile as much as I could in commercials, so that I could then just not do them and go off and do my films. And then if the film fails, I can go back to doing commercials, build back up again, go back to long form takes such a long time that I love commercials. I love it. Like, it means I can finance my own projects as well and everything like that. So yeah, that was kind of there was a conscious effort to go pretty full on.
Yeah. What I find interesting about that is it's because your desire was to end up doing long form, you dedicated yourself to commercials in a way, and you had that militant kind of approach for commercials where you wanted to get that body of work established, like you say, and you went for it so kind of like passionately to get to film that you ended up kind of like pushing commercials forward in a way that I think if you just wanted to be a commercials director, you might have not done that. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of ironic that to get to the next stage, you ended up establishing it so well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I haven't thought about that before. Yeah, I was viewing them as with total respect, but also just trying not to compromise, and just like doing it. Well, if I do this commercial, this is how I do it. Like, and then push it. But then it was worked with amazing creatives who were like really I was shocked going into commercials from music video and having more trust in many respects in the ad world from agencies and creatives than in music videos, sometimes with certain projects or hearing stories and stuff. Obviously there's loads of freedom in music videos, you can do really wild stuff, but in terms of process and protection, I had quite a good experience with that.
But that's because I think that is because you establish yourself so well in music videos, and all the tropes that you're into, that we're going to hopefully break down a little bit more later in this conversation, about how you sort of see the world and the things you're interested in exploring photographically and in terms of sort of the ideas. You established that body of work in music videos. So there was a definite kind of Ian Pons Jewell approach. And then that got sold into commercials by like some people that really saw that in you and thought, well, this can be applied to commercials. had you not had that long period, 7-year period of music videos, I don't know if that would have actually happened. Maybe you would have got swallowed up into the commercials kind of conservatism, and you might not have had the chance for people to really see what you could offer, and then use that as a way to sell your style to a commercial. Because that's what I think is so interesting, is that you kind of change commercials in a way, like the way sort of people like Frank Budgeon, you mentioned Jonathan Glazer and Tony Kaye for sure. Certain figures that come along, and through their pure kind of vision and tenacity, they sort of change the language a little bit. And I think that's kind of that's what you've sort of done, and you're sort of like a modern version of that. And I think that's down to the stint in music videos and the fact you've created a signature style.
Yeah, I think that if without I'd because I'd almost given up as well on trying to get a commercial, and that I'd done so many music videos. Yeah, you end up, there's no question of who you are when you go into the ad space, for sure. I think having the more of that you can have when you go into it, the better. I wouldn't say it's good to turn down a commercial opportunity if you get it early on, but there's massive benefits of building what you are before you go into it. Because, because I mean, ultimately a commercial it's a compromised space already. So if you're going in with your uncompromised armor or self into that space, that you're getting brought into it for the uncompromised version of you as much as they can get from that before you go into it. So yeah, I think that is a good point.
I mean, there's so many bad commercials made in terms of, just like the ideas. I mean, that's unfair actually. Commercials that are just there to sell a product, but then to not necessarily don't need to do it with style. They can just do it in a functional way. But the scripts that you got quite early on were all very visual scripts that demanded that treatment, which, having worked with other directors in the past, sometimes they have to fight off these things that just kind of get offered to them and they're completely not right for them, but they're kind of money, and it's really hard to sort of turn that money down. I remember you saying once in one of the podcasts I listened to how important it is to stay time rich, and to sort of find a way to support yourself so you can wait for the correct opportunities to come along to develop.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and talking about the path of video commercial film, I don't even recommend, everyone should do videos and then commercials and then film, because if you've got the mental state and ability to just be doing film, amazing. There's loads of benefits from doing commercials and then doing film. There's a lot of benefits from the videos, then the commercials. It's just like my personal path that I did. But if you can just go and make film, incredible. I think now what's interesting is filmmakers who then can go and do a commercial now and then, because if you between two films, 4 years might pass that you're not on set. Something we've been talking to with a friend who's a features director, and if you don't do, so what do you shoot between the two films as well? So yeah, and then in terms of the bad commercial, it's viewing it as the opportunity might just be financial. That bad commercial might pay for your rent for a year, might completely ease off all financial stresses you have to allow you to then focus on the script you're doing, or if you're DP, shooting very low paid, whatever. So it's about viewing the project you're doing, I think, with the right, for what it is. It might just be a money thing, so then it is. But there's always some space, even in a bad commercial, to get something from it, I think, aside from money. It could be just blocking, you get blocking experience, get experience of talking with a team that you might not see eye to eye with creatively, So then you're gaining like persuasion tactics and human understanding of so but it's
interesting. There's always something to be gained. It's like the dry stone wall philosophy of you always use the stone that's in your hand, because if you hunt around for the perfect stone, you're there forever, whereas there's always a place for that stone sort of thing. So you always sort of use what's around you, which is kind of like, when I look at your career, you've done a lot of that. It's like kind of going to, traveling to Bolivia, for example, and finding opportunities there, and finding, and building your team as you go. So let's talk a little bit about that, about some of your relationships. So the first sort of significant relationship was you were making films with your mates, weren't you, from film school? Is that right? And then when you first moved into commercials, at that point you had the Horn Church. I would imagine the relationship you have with Anorak in Berlin. There was a producer that really saw something in you, right? And Horn Church.
Yeah, well, so the first thing I had was a Tello.
Yeah.
And that came to me, and Anorak were really pushed as well. And that job happened, and then because of that, Guido Heffels at Hornbach then gave me the opportunity to pitch on Hornbach.
Right, so he was a client or the agency?
Guido Heffels is this legendary creative, and he's like he has his own agency called Hi Mat, and he was with Hornbach in the beginning of that like client ad agency career, and he just built the most incredible, like one of the greatest agency client portfolios. It's on the level with like Nike and Wyden, but I think it's just on a different level. The trust that they've got for him is wild. I mean, and he's truly uncompromising, so working with him was just, I felt like I'd gone back. It was like, now I realize how peculiar it is. Like he's like working with someone back in like golden age or whatever. You hear about these like singular visionary creative directors at agencies that have loads of power and trust from the client, and but working with him was
it's like working with Don Draper from Mad Men or something.
It would be on that level. It was wild, incredible.
What a great introduction.
He was exactly. I mean, giving me the confidence to like push creative. I was sitting with him like this, and we do a take, and he's like, and it was like the guy at the toolbox looking like at the camera. Yeah. And he's like, there's something not right here. And he's like, have him spit as a camera. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. I was like, it's like, okay. And I was like, shit, like, great, but I mean, okay. So I went up to even the actor didn't want to do it, and he was like, oh, it's really rude here in Romania, I was like, yeah, it's kind of something quite rude. It's rude everywhere, you don't tend to spit at the camera or people, and and that was his note. It's it was crazy.
When you're getting notes like that, you're in for a good ride, right?
So I mean, we wrote this scene with them carrying like 2 beams of wood like Jesus Christ, and I was like, this is never going to go through. And we framed it just in the way that it would feel like he's, this bloodied, injured Jesus walking to the, to put up his own death cross, and it's like all in this commercial. It's wild. And it just, that was a really formulating experience. The first one, because it was like to get trust of doing something creative, and then the second one with Hornbach, it was I mean, I was very lucky.
You can really see a shift in your commercial, because the first one was beautifully shot. You did that with Mauro?
Mauro, yeah.
But it was, to me, I couldn't see as much as your signature style into it. But then when the Hornbach came out, I was thinking, okay, this is almost like the beginning of your journey. And you can see when the preceding commercial, you can really see yourself take flight with some of these ideas that were evident in your music videos and then coming through into commercials in a way that was, I think, so fresh and so unique.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was the first. There was a VFX budget, and we did, going through the wall and that transition. Really, like, I mean, they've been done before, and they've been done after, but yeah, it was one of the most
And so
things.
when you wrote that, when you got the script, did you kind of get any input in the writing of
it? Was completely collaborative with Guido. We sat down and I did a treatment based off the first chat we had, and wrote scenes, and he'd written stuff, I added stuff, and then we got the gig, and then we met up in Berlin and in Anorak, and we just putting stuff on the wall and chatting and like writing, and it was proper.
Yeah, that's
the dream.
I think that's evident in the piece of work, because it is so breathtaking and so.
I mean, also, the voiceover was in the edit, right? In the edit was, and that edit was with Tobias Soom. So I work with Gaia Barretti since day one, music videos, and still do now. It's just like incredible.
The one you traded English lessons for editing.
That's the one. And then Tobias I met on Hornbach in Berlin. And I've continued that relationship with him, and Gaia, it was the music video work was just our relationship with that was incredible. And then Tobias, I think I saw with his abilities with was Hornbach, when we had quite a linear edit. It was quite this scene and stand for something and and the voiceover was talked of was spoken in a regular pace. And we did the edit, we looked at it, I was like, what do people think? And the producers like, yeah, good. And what's interesting when you work in Germany is they don't bullshit you, they don't do the well done, great, right. So it's really good, and anyway, but here's some thoughts. You don't get any of that initial like pat on the back. It's just and then they go straight in with what's wrong with it. Right. It's quite
quite brutal. It's
quite difficult. Like
not good for
at the beginning, and you're like, it's just a different way of working. It's it's
but
quite refreshing.
Very, very efficient though.
It's efficient. There's no all the wasted energy on niceties. So then we looked at it, and Guido was like, I'm not happy with it. And I was like, oh god, like it looks great, and I'm like, can't imagine it being like different or better. It was like as we planned it. And then he goes off and he like he records the voice himself, and he says it in this like totally like just jumping around, like stand for something, and like mumbling and like jumping around with the voiceover. And then he comes back in and goes, use this, and they're like, okay. And then Tobias brings in his voiceover, and the voiceover, because it was so like here and there and like loud and quiet, and Tobias just then like just edited it in this like with speed ramps and like short burst, and it's like the most stunning change of edit. And I was just like, holy shit. Like from Guido's just never letting anything sit and just keep pushing it, to then Tobias being like completely changing the thing on that. It was it was a really special project.
So this makes me think about how your career has basically been collaborating with people and keeping a really open mind to the craft and learning this craft of filmmaking and applying that to your vision. It's like these key relationships you're saying, like with the editor and that creative. And I can see that probably with your DOPs as well, because I mean the Malraux relationship seems to be quite a special one for you. I can sort of see the elevation, and because that's something I sort of want to talk at a fair bit, because he has a certain magical way with light that it's, he's quite out there as a DOP, I think, from looking at the work, and it's so suited to your vision, and it's to create that perfect craft. For your vision to have been executed with perfect craft requires someone of his standard, I think, to have that sensitivity to light. One thing I want to ask you actually, with regards to, because the thing that stands out about your work, I think, is that one of the many things that stands out about your work is the way you move the camera and the efficiency of how you move the camera, and the mixing of forms as well. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So I can see kind of a little bit of Wes Anderson, kind of like the parallel track and the Kubrick, the sort of parallel tracks, and then the whip-ons and the wide-angle whip to reveal kind of, another element rather than using a cut. You kind of whip to something. It's a very kind of incredibly efficient, precise way of moving cameras. How much of that is something that you have? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of that now is forced up before the shooting. A lot of that's kind of, it's designed by you beforehand. Is that right? Or
yeah, I storyboard everything as much as possible, pre-plan everything as much as I can. From when I was in music videos, it was a nightmare. I hate it. It was like this. I was like, just, I'd be like freaking out the day before the shoot, and I'd be working.
It's like homework,
till,
leaving it to the last moment.
Like 4 or 5 in the morning, doing like timing breakdowns in the shot, and you don't have I didn't know how to break stuff down as properly earlier on, and you're trying to do it in like however with like describing the shot, and then with the seconds, and then actually I think that should go later, and you have to change it, and it was really painful. And then I didn't storyboard, but I described the shot because I knew how it was in my head. I didn't take pictures for some reason. And then then you're storyboarding. I got more into that. So there's a lot of pre-planning, but then on the shoot, then when we scout and tech recce, then you're constantly adapting and changing it, and then on set you're going in with a pretty good plan, but then just adapting, and
So you work out some of those moves beforehand, like on a tech scout, and does Mauro have an input on that?
For sure.
Kind of collaborative process.
I mean, Mauro's like my split in half with him. We're like really special. I'm very lucky, to have that relationship. We have, and it's super open, and because we've known each other for so long.
When did you meet, if you don't mind?
On Otello.
Oh, because that's the first job I saw.
Yeah, and
where was that shot?
Denmark.
Right.
Yeah. And we just try stuff. I like to operate a lot. Sometimes it's because I'm bored. I'm sitting, and everyone's doing stuff, and I'm like waiting, and then sometimes it's just out of boredom. I'm like, I just want to get on the camera and then just sit on the camera, and then sit around and watch people do stuff. But and then just holding it and feeling it a bit more, being closer to the actors. I really like that. And so with Mauro, we have a really great, like, he'll operate, then I will. I'll, and then sometimes when you've got a new DP relationship, I'll forget to mention that I operate, or I like to, and there's been, then you get into the, could I? And they're like, they don't know, or and it's not an issue. It's never an issue, but it's always like, you forget like the shorthand. You end up with someone that you collaborate with.
And some DOPs think of operating as a really, really important part of their role, but others, I think Mauro, I mean, he's next level in terms, because his lighting is so. For sure. Yeah, it's so transcendental, his lighting, that you can imagine that I'm assuming that I actually want to ask you how.
I have absolutely zero input on hardly anything. I don't even. I mean, it's crazy with Mauro. I don't. It's like talking to. Go extreme on the hype, but it's like talking to Da Vinci. Like, his lighting is. I mean, there's no. We talk about what time of the. It's daytime. The scene's daytime or it's night, but then he just does his thing and just has like this other way of doing treating the atmosphere and the look of it. And, you know, we'll do back and forth and we'll talk over it, but sometimes they'll be like, oh, actually this is not right, like, you know, whatever, but I'm really not thinking about
to begin with, or was it
not really. I mean, not there's, I mean, they're in the treatment, you know, I've got the vibe of it and we talk and I'll have few kind of maybe references of like, you know, this kind of thing maybe, but it's really me and him talking, and he's really got a big hold of that. And then he operates, you know, he's not DP that doesn't operate, but he's also cool with me jumping on and operating a bit. And he's actually handheld. He's always tends to do that. Like sometimes I'll do a bit, but because
what I found exciting through the chronology of your work was how it seemed to be like a very pure artistic relationship between you and Mauro and some of your other, you know, some of your editors and whatnot, that it feels like you're all growing together as artists.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, big time. I mean, with Mauro, so when I got the Otello thing, I knew it was specifically black and white from the beginning. All their ads at that point had been black and white. So it was this amazing, very rare opportunity where the client and the agency are like, this is going to be black and white. You're like, cool.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity.
Great. And then, so I asked, and there I am in the first time in the world of like commercials, and they're like, oh, we'll find some DOPs for you. I was like, oh, okay. And, you know,
you use Ben Fordsman?
So, Ben Fordsman is massively important relationship I've had as well. And still now, we've missed each other on some projects over the last bit. But Ben is another DP relationship that I've had, and you know that that was a huge step for me when we did Paolo Nutini. That's when I first worked with Ben, and it was like, holy shit. That I mean,
in terms of what a DOP can bring to your game.
I mean, I was like, I had this. Oh, you know, I wanted the thing I wanted to do with it was this Italian giallo film inspired kind of story and the light and everything, and he just killed it. And then I was doing everything with Ben, but you know how it, like you end up then Otello, he wasn't available, so I ended up working with Mauro, and then Hornback came in, and that was with Ben, you know. And then and then anyway, so yeah, as you know, he's a genius. And now he's on features. He's St. Maud, and he's just done Rose Glass's new film, and it's incredible. So what was I saying? So and then with Mauro, with Otello, you know, I was like, oh, I need, you know, who's about. So then I had the whole, we'll check DP's availabilities from agents, and I was like, oh wow, okay, cool. And then they started sending me all these names. I was like, what? And I was like, oh, there's so many people to look at. I was like, look, I don't want to look at anything other than their black and white work, because even though I hadn't really shot black and white, I was very particular about black and white, because I see a lot of bad black and white work. Fincher again, like for me, is like the ultimate black and white work. You know, it's Calvin Klein. It's commercial still, just blows my mind. And anyway, I mean, recently with Mank, but so I said I only want to see the black and white reels of directors, and I would just look at it. Doesn't matter who they were, what they'd done. I was just looking at the images. And I was looking through, and there's like some big DP that had done massive films like Legend, but I'd look at it, I was like, cool, black and white was good. I was going through, and then this one reel came up, and it was Mauro's, and there's like nothing you'd ever heard of. There was no like Apple or like a feature or anything. It was like a fashion film and like this obscure like other Italian brand. But the black and white work with the lighting on it. The images were just on a whole other level from all of the other DPs. It was just a different level.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the guy.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it with Mauro. And then, that's how we then worked together on our telly. And it was my first commercial, and it was one of his bigger things at that time, because he'd done like, he was in Italy and doing like smaller stuff, videos, and then we really just
took off together
for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about the next. So the next significant film for me would be the Finish.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that, and it's like, could you talk a little bit about the production of that? And because that was you and Mauro as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Mauro. Yeah, that was just hilarious job.
Did you have any? Because you have input in the scripts. Was there a collaboration?
Yeah, for sure. That was. I just can't believe we made it. That one was always just mad. The creatives are incredible. The finished commercial had just the most amazing creative already. It was like they had the song written, they had the whole thing of like people hating dishes and all these different situations. The creatives were amazing. Kristen and Bertie, and the ECDs were Carlos and Laura, and they just wanted the best film possible, and there was felt like there was no compromise on how far we could go with it, and we just pushed it, and like the whole smiling, like, I think for English thing, hidden trauma, smiles,
hidden trauma,
which I feel like you see everywhere in the country. It was like
it's
the
like
whole
basis
basis
it's like a version of the
commercial.
David Lynch opening sequence of the kind of, the ear in the ground sort of thing. It's like that kind of hidden sort of world of trauma, like you say. With the veneer of everything's okay.
And there was also like the opening shot that goes to the guy from behind and then up to the side, and he turns to the camera. The poor guy did like I think they did like close to 60 takes. Poor Steadicam Doug. We did like, I think it was like 55 takes.
That's a Steadicam, was it?
I think it was Steadicam. I think, yeah. And but we were just kept pushing it, and like it was so funny that all the like, how do I like, it wasn't quite right. It's like telling him like, and then the final direction, it was like, first it was like, oh, you're kind of like an abused dog, and like we come up to you and you're like, or
carrying,
and then we kept pushing. It's like, oh, okay, you're like, and then it was like, okay, look, you're masturbating in your bedroom furiously, and the camera is your mum. And we were talking out loud.
There's no VFX involved in this.
No.
Really? Because I just figured that you might have made the eyes slightly different from your previous work.
There's no VFX, and that, it's like, it was, the whole thing was ridiculous. And then realised that everyone washing the dishes was at the window, especially when they're covered up. Well, then we just couldn't get it out of our heads. That it was super fun. So
so I want to talk to you a little bit, break down the camera moves and visual language on that a little bit. So there's that probe, because you got this wonderful way of working with probe lenses, with sort of probe lenses, and then going back to normal lens sets and kind of integrating this sort of probe vista into normal lens language. And so you have that shot going through when she's got the wrinkly hands, and you have that shot, the probe shot going through, and then you cut to a side shot when she turns, and she's moving on a dolly or something, is it?
Yeah. She's on a the thing with wheels. Little platform dolly or whatever. Yeah. Was she attached? I haven't seen it in ages. I don't know if she was attached to the dolly. We were moving with her. maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
because didn't we? I don't know if we were on side or we pushed in.
You were profile and you were moving along with her, I think. Actually.
Yeah, it's slots.
That made sense. Yeah. And then the husband was there, and her arms come to the husband. Yeah. But was that something you planned beforehand? Was that because that's such an unusual.
I wanted to get the hands. How we wanted these pruny hands, and prosthetics were making such an amazing pruny hand prosthetic.
Yeah, you wanted to really get close to that.
I just wanted to see
really
it,
feel it. Yeah,
and the boroscope. I'm trying to think the first time I used it.
Which do you have a preference on which one you use? Because you use it quite a lot.
I can't remember the
T-Rex name. Or Oxford?
No, it's the cheap one. It's like
the Laura one.
That's it.
Oh,
that's
wow.
Yeah,
is
I
that the
kept
one
joking.
you use?
I need to just buy one because I just use that all the.
So that's the majority of your Probe lens stuff is a Laura, because that was my other question. Is that you have shots on the Probe lens, like on the Apple Watch when you're pulling out of the watch and you're doing a rotation.
There's occasionally we'll use the one that's more expensive.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of
that one a lot.
Optics excellence, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, diamond film use it. Yeah, and that one was pretty sure it's that one. With the hand, the one with the hands was that. And it was just like, well, how do we see it, and feel the.
Yeah. Because that's one of the questions I had for some of your other work, because you use the Probe lens, and I was trying to work out how you'd rig the camera with a full-on sort of, like T-Rex or something. And
it wasn't T-Rex.
And that makes a lot of sense now, because you have some shots that look like they're handheld with a Probe lens, and I'm like, so how's he got that with with one of these massive lenses? What kind of rigs the operator got on to get that to work? And now you said that, it's like almost like it all makes sense. It all fits into place now. That So is that something that early on? Because I noticed that early on with your even like August Lullaby, you're very early that you were going up the nose, kind of wide angle up the nose. You quite like getting close to your subjects and sort of exaggerating their proportions by using wide angle lenses. Is that when you first saw the Probe lens? Was it when that lens was first released that you kind of started thinking I could really put this into my...
I'm trying to think the first time. In general, I liked wide lenses close to faces rather than long lenses. It was just a preference I had that I liked. And then I generally like deep focus. In general, I like the detail.
Yeah.
I wider lenses up close rather than long lenses. Yeah. Then the Probe, I'm trying to think the first time I used it.
So I have a point to make on that. Yeah. If you're going to go for deep focus, you think like films like Citizen Kane with Greg Toland, who was developing, because before, in the early days of cinema, everyone was trying to develop deep focus, and then we have this obsession with narrow focus. But traditional cinema was deep focus and having the sets all beautifully designed, right?
Yeah, I think that there was. So when I was finishing, on the final year of university, what's interesting is that as a film student, pre-red camera, array camera, and everything, digital cinema, really great digital cinema cameras. We were using we were either shooting on 16mm, and we then can have an array of lenses on the camera, or you're shooting on like a Z1, Sony Z1, like those kinds of documentary kind of cameras, and you're shooting with them, and they're generally quite deep focus. And you're like, how do I get the cinema thing? And you're like, oh, it's shallow focus. That's cinema, So then you would get the lens adapters.
Yeah.
And we had what was it called?
Red Rock.
Yeah, that was it. Red Rock. I had another one, but we had.
PS Technic did one as well.
Yeah, I think that was the one I had.
Yeah.
We had, and that came in on the final year. So then we were using those. I'm like, wow, we can use all these different lenses now, and shallow focus was incredible
to be
able to suddenly have, whereas previous to that we didn't have it unless you were shooting on film.
Yeah, but even 16mm is quite deep focus, isn't it? So you never get a chance to see that 35mm depth of field, right?
Yeah. So it was like, oh wow, that was, so there was a bit of a, being able to suddenly use those lenses was good. And then
but what I wanted to mention with your work is that, so people love narrow depth of field, love large format, the ARRI, LF, for example, and all the large format cameras. Everyone loves them because of that narrow depth of field and softening the background, which is, it hides a multitude of sins, right? But when you're getting into the next level of sort of filmmaking in terms of having control of your mise en scène, controlling all your elements, the art direction and lighting and all of that, then in some ways it makes sense to go for a deeper depth of field, because you want to show off all those elements, like like Fincher would, or Terry Gilliam, filmmakers that do a beautiful job at creating this sort of mise en scène, and they want to show it. And then when you're using lenses like probe lenses that show infinite depth of field, the problem with, I think, a lot of filmmakers have with them is it just looks really ugly, because they don't have the craft to create the correct mise en scène in order for that to work. And the work you do with your, because I want to get onto the production designers at some point, but the work you do with your production designers and your DOPs, it's like such excellent craft that you can afford to show the whole thing off, and it still to look cinematic.
That's the thing, that probe lens isn't expensive, but if the lighting,
if that's not on point, it looks terrible, right? It looks
awful,
really terrible. It looks so digital, right? So the way you get around that is through the craft.
Right? And that's the thing, with Mauro, we'd be shooting a scene, and we're switching between the probe and the f-stop of that to then,
so he has to light everything up to the level of the probe.
It's got to be ready for both.
Yeah.
And match them both. And
that's a real skill to do that. I really noticed that with your work. It's like, that's why I was thinking, Christ, you've got a really good relationship with your DOP here. Because and people just see that effortlessly, because and we'll get onto the whole VFX thing and how you blend things effortlessly. But what the real skill you brought, I think, to commercials is the way you can blend all of these different forms effortlessly, and they become one package, and they have one very clear point of view, and the comedy works and everything works really well. But the craft that goes into that, I think people don't understand necessarily how much craft goes into. So because it looks so effortless, right?
Yeah, it is. It's masses of work from a lot of incredible people. I think with the comedy thing, I do notice that there's, as soon as something is a comedy, there's almost it allows, if you want, for the filmmaker to ease off the depth of detail of the characters, of the scene, of the craft, or whatever. Like you can, because it's funny, you can ease off a lot of areas and just focus on the comedy or whatever. But I think because maybe it comes from I've got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about like being the wacky, funny director thing or whatever. I'm like, but I'm a serious filmmaker. I don't know, maybe that also pushes me to like push the images a lot. I think
you don't. I was about to interrupt you and say, but you don't ease off, because all of your work has such a polished, beautiful, refined look to it. And if I may, I'd like to talk a little bit about your style, because you say that people talk about your work and they say, the surreal kind of post-internet kind of style that you have, but I see that's half your work, and you go for. I think you've got two very distinctive styles. One of them that I'd say is that kind of like poppy kind of graphic, exaggerated kind of comedy look. But then the other one is a sort of transcendental, emotional, like the Diamonds or even the Lexus, where you came from shooting the job we were just talking about, the finished job, and you went straight onto a Lexus job that's a completely different world, and it's got that kind of dreamlike emotions, but in a very sophisticated, sort of more kind of like traditional filmmaking way, but you still manage to tap into getting this sort of magic realism, transcendental kind of qualities out of it. Could you talk a little bit about those two sort of distinct styles?
So before commercials, it's like music video, and you got a lot of freedom there, but still you're doing it within the feeling of the music. So you're finding yourself, but within somebody else's world, musically, let's say. But you're still on a journey to find your own, working your own kind of creative world or whatever. Finding your core. And then in a short film, it's total freedom to be with your own creative self. And the things that come out from that are different from a music video. But then when you go into commercials, your creative core is being used by the overriding corporation to create a piece of corporate propaganda. There's no other way of looking at it there is, there's art to it. Like, commercials can be art in a way, but ultimately you're working within the confines of corporate needs, and you're finding pockets of freedom within that, which ultimately serve the corporate interest for the advertisement ultimately. So within all these different spaces, you're an artist that your purest self is being kind of, you're placing it into and getting it, working it within these different spaces. So the things that come out with it are different. And I think with commercials, there's kind of certain spaces within it, and then you've got the that I've found that I'm now able to kind of, okay, I'm on, which hat am I wearing?
Right.
It's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But then I try to have a continuation between all of it, which is just like, there's certain ways I like to place the camera, or there's ways that I like to have actors perform. One of the biggest things is a continuation is working with the same actors, because I love the actors I work with, the faces that I love, and I like to have them in from, there'll be people in the 3 Real 5G commercial, and then they'll also be in the Diamond commercial, and they're in 2 totally different spaces, but it's like a kind of traveling circus. So you can have a continuation with that, and then it's tonally, I love to be able, I would love to be able to do in commercial, get a bit more, ultimately I just have to choose to what projects to do. But I love doing, when I do get an opportunity to do something like the Diamond film or the Lexus film, or it's great. But I've done a lot of, the thing I'm trying not to do is the vignette thing is it's not tiring. It's just like I love it, but you can't get stuck into that character and their world. You're in it, and then you're out again. You want to be able to
develop a character a bit more now.
You don't get to that. You get to do other stuff, which is really playing with the form a lot more. But I don't know if that answers your question.
It kind of does, because you talk about, one of them's playing with the form more, which is you've expertly done for quite a body of work now, and you're saying that you want to develop now into more kind of character expansion, which would explain also your move into long form, because that's obviously the world that you can properly do that.
It's things like, so and this was one of my favorite things I've done. I don't know if you got to see that one. It was the banana one. Did you see that? Plátanos de Canarias.
Oh yeah.
With the takeoff.
Yeah.
That was with Ben Forgeman, and it's like, it's ridiculous. There's a guy sitting at home, and then he takes off from his sofa and gets off his arse and leaves the house. Yeah. With
that's a single shot with the guy's the nostrils.
The nostril one, and it's like,
I love that.
And because it's just this one person in a flat, I got to really delve into who he is, what his job might be, and then we had like, the fish tank we put purposefully dead fish in it. He hadn't fed them, and put in like invented a fake film called flat Earth thriller and put that in the background. That poster's even been in a couple of of commercials. Can't remember what the other one is.
It reminds me a little bit of the Canadian photographer that does large format. What's his?
I don't remember the name.
We'll have to pause again to get things. But he basically goes to such an extent to get the backstory in his photographs that there's one shot of a woman ironing on an ironing table in a flat, and so rather than just getting someone to iron, in a flat, he basically rents the flat, hires an actor, gets her to live in his flat for 2 months.
Oh my God!
And then eventually gets this 10:8 photograph at the end of it, and the behind the scenes, the story of it is more interesting than the actual finished result. Which actually reminds me of one of the conversations that I was having before you turned up today. Was about I'd love to see more behind the scenes of your work. I mean, I saw the virtual reality job, the
Oculus.
Oculus, yeah. And I think the danger is with your craft is you do such a good job that people don't. I was having a debate with James actually about this. That I was saying, well, I'd like to have seen it like less perfect in the worlds you're creating. So it was definite. I understood it definitely as being a real space, because I mean, what people might not be aware of is that the majority of that Oculus campaign was shot live action, right? When I saw it, I assumed it was games footage because it's so well done.
Oh wow!
And so that kind of blend between the virtual, VFX and the real world, real live action was so excellent, so perfectly executed that I felt that I'd love to, that behind. When I saw the behind the scenes, I got really excited about the amount of craft you put into that job. And but James's argument was, well, actually, the people that are buying that are interested in the virtual reality. They're not actually interested in knowing how much effort the filmmaker went to. So it sold the product perfectly because it was that virtual world, right, that you were selling. But I was like, but it's such a shame that other filmmakers can't see the craft there as well, because the craft was so hidden, is what I'm trying to say. That campaign.
I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Like the more you know about the making of it, the less the less powerful maybe the piece is. But then in that case, it's interesting because if you don't know that how much is live action, it's the reverse. Not the reverse, but yeah. I
mean, as a filmmaker, it's that fascinating. But then I guess these days, most people, most of the general public would be interested in that. Whereas years ago, it was something that people just didn't really have enough understanding of to kind of, want to know more. But nowadays, everyone's got a phone that they take pictures on and take video on. So everyone's an amateur filmmaker in a sense. So that behind the scenes becomes interesting as a general, for the general population rather than just niche filmmakers, I think.